I had a dad who modeled great things for me. And I remember that in this moment, if some of you are familiar with Bus Church, one person raised their hand last time. But I don't know if y'all remember Bus Church or not. 70s, 80s, early 90s, if you're really holding on. And it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It just wasn't as fruitful of a thing. It was a great theory that we could send buses to maybe impoverished areas or places where kids needed to be picked up, and we would bus them into the church and we would share the gospel with them. The problem is that that's kind of remained a model, whether it's buses or not, for a long time, and we've watched the church decline because if we don't reach parents and we don't reach families, it's very hard to keep children reached. Amen? We need to reach entire generations, and we need to reach heads of household just as much as we need to reach students. And so, but God uses that. God uses our efforts. He uses our failures. He uses our brokenness. And so what it really turned into, the church I grew up at, there'd be 200 or 300 kids bust into this big area, and it would be like a circus. Like people are lighting things on fire over here, some kids doing this. I mean, like you just don't know what's happening. And so my dad would step in and he would serve, and he helped just be crowd control. He wasn't a teacher, he didn't do Sunday school. But my dad, if you can imagine, I'm the tallest person in my family. We're all Scots-Irish, so we all fight a temper, and we're all short and fat. So that's just how we roll. But my dad's about right here, and he's got white hair, and he always said I was short, so I could either be a jerk or I could learn to be nice and smart. And so I just picked nice and smart. And so, but everybody likes Mr. Will. You'd love him if you met him. And so Mr. Will just sat on the couches, and he would sit back. He's about 45 years old, and kids every once in a while would just gravitate towards him, and they would talk with him. And there were a million things he could do. Keep this kid from lighting a fire, keep that kid from stealing that, keep this going over here. But he took the moments that he had to engage with people, inviting people to our table. Sometimes it's a physical table. Other times it's a moment to engage and to speak truth into their lives. And so these kids would come up and talk, and there was one of them, her name was Jenny. And Jenny, I was very young, too young to remember this at the time, probably 7 or 8. I just don't remember him doing a lot of that. And he would sit, and she would come up every once in a while and just sit down and talk with him. In one particular time, he told me about, because I learned about it in retrospect, she grew up in a mobile home park. There's nothing wrong with that, but often there's a stigma with that. And there's the discussion that if you grow up in certain areas or certain climates, unless you have the right voices speaking into you, sometimes you're doomed to stay in those places and not get out of them. You need voices that raise you up, not keep you down. And Jenny heard all of those voices, but she would so often, and this breaks my heart, so often from a pulpit or from a stage, we hear that we can do better, but in relationships around us, nobody tells us that. And so she said to my dad, she goes, Mr. Will, I hear people say all the time, you can be anything you want to be. You can be so much better. But I grew up in a trailer park. What am I going to be? She goes, I'm just doomed to be who I am. And my dad just remembers this one conversation, and he looked at her and he said, Jenny, I'm going to be honest with you. He said, you can be anything that Jesus tells you you can be. Don't ever let somebody tell you that you cannot do the thing that he calls you to be. He said, that's absolutely wrong. He said, and you are never doomed to be anything other than what he has asked you to do and to be. And that seems innocuous. That doesn't even seem costly. It cost attention. It cost focus. It cost being present in the moment. Jim Elliot said, wherever you are, be all there. And in the moment he was there, and he tells her this story, you would think, and she disappeared as thousands and thousands of kids did. She just disappeared a couple months later, never saw her again, forgot about her. 10 years later, this is where I pick up in the story. A postcard comes through our mail from Romania. And I didn't pick it up. I heard the story. My dad gets it. He looks at it, reads it, kind of laughs, smirks. And he tells me the story about her. And it said, hey, Mr. Will, it's Jenny. I just wanted to tell you, it turns out I could do anything Jesus asked me to do. I'm a missionary in Romania now. Thank you for telling me the truth. Because costly grace sometimes is easy to give, but it requires us to give it and to speak truth, and it reminds us of our future. It doesn't leave us in our past.